Somewhere between 800 and 200 BC, the dates are uncertain. The texts themselves are indifferent to the question of when they were written. Philosophers sitting in forests at the edge of Indian civilization asked a question that had not been asked before. Not what is the world made of? The Greek philosophers were asking that. Not how should we live? The Chinese philosophers were asking that. Not what do the gods require? They asked, what is the self? Not the body, not the name, not the social role, the family position, the accumulated history of a person moving through the world. They meant the thing that is aware of all of those, the witness, the knower, the presence that is present behind every experience, behind every thought, behind every emotion and perception, and the coming and going of everything that rises and passes away. What is that? And then, in the move that separates the Upanishads from every other philosophical tradition that has ever addressed this question, they made a claim so radical, so counterintuitive, so completely opposed to ordinary experience that it has been argued about and meditated on and dismissed and rediscovered for 3,000 years. They said that thing, the witness, the deepest self, is the same as the ground of all reality. Atman is Brahman. The self at the deepest level and the source of the universe at the deepest level are not two things, are the same thing, appearing as two from the vantage point of ordinary consciousness, but one in the view from the forest. This is the teaching of the Upanishads, and it is the most consequential philosophical claim ever made about who you are. We live inside a very particular story about the self. The story goes like this. You are a person, a specific, bounded individual person with a name and a history and a set of characteristics that distinguish you from other persons. Your interior life, your thoughts, your feelings, your memories, your sense of what you want and fear and love is yours, private, contained within the boundary of a skin, separate from the interior lives of other persons and from the world those persons and you jointly inhabit.
This is the obvious story, the story that ordinary experience seems to confirm at every moment. The story that the entirety of Western philosophy, from Descartes' I think, therefore I am, to the contemporary neuroscience of the individual brain, has been elaborating and refining. The forest philosophers of the Upanishads sat in the forests and did something different with this story. They did not argue against it philosophically. They investigated it directly, turned the attention inward, the attention that normally moves outward toward objects and experiences and the ongoing flow of the world, and asked it to look at itself. What is doing the looking? And in that investigation, reported across the Upanishads in the form of dialogues between teachers and students, between sages and kings, between a father and his curious son, they found something that the ordinary story about the self does not quite account for. The Upanishads are not a single text. They are a collection, 108 by traditional count, though the principal ones number around a dozen, of philosophical dialogues and meditations and teachings that constitute the philosophical conclusion of the Vedic tradition. Upanishad means roughly sitting near the teacher, the student who has come close enough to receive what cannot be shouted across a distance. They were composed in the forests by people who had withdrawn, at least partially, from the life of the villages and the cities and the elaborate ritual structure of mainstream Vedic religion, who were asking whether the rituals were pointing at something real, and if so, what, and whether the something real could be encountered directly, without the ritual's mediation. The answer they arrived at, through meditation, through dialogue, through the specific disciplined form of inward investigation that the Sanskrit tradition calls jhana, knowing, was that the something real could be encountered directly, was, in fact, the most intimate thing available, was not out there, beyond the ritual, at the end of a long external search, was here, always here, the very one who was searching. This is the first great paradox of the Upanishads. The Atman, the deepest self, cannot be found by the search, because the searcher is what is being sought. You cannot see the I with the I. You cannot find the one who is looking by looking outward. There is a teaching from the Chandogya Upanishad, one of the oldest and most important, that I want to stay with, because it is the most concentrated expression of the central insight available to us. A young man named Shvetaketu has returned from 12 years of study with the Vedic teachers. He is full of knowledge, scripture, ritual, the accumulated learning of the tradition. And his father, the sage Udalaka Aruni, asks him a question. Do you know that by knowing which everything becomes known?
By knowing which everything becomes known. Not, do you know many things? Not, have you memorized the texts? The one knowledge, the knowledge that illuminates all other knowledge, the understanding of the ground from which all experience arises. Do you know that? Shvetaketu says, no, the teachers did not teach that. And Udalaka proceeds to teach it. In a series of experiments, dissolve salt in water, then try to find the salt. The salt is everywhere in the water, invisible but present in every part. In a series of meditations, trace the origin of the tree back to the seed back to the thing from which it came, which is invisible, which is formless, which is everywhere. In a series of statements, each one ending with the phrase, Tat Tvam Asi, that thou art. That thou art. The invisible ground of all things, the Brahman, the source, the formless presence from which the world arises, that is what you are. Not what you have, not what you know, not what you have achieved or become or accumulated. What you are. At the deepest level, before the name, before the history, before the story of a particular person moving through a particular world. That. The Upanishads use an image for the deepest self, the Atman, that I want to sit with carefully, because it is the image that has done more than any argument to transmit this teaching across the centuries. They compare the Atman to a lamp inside a pot. The pot is the body, the specific, particular bounded form that a given life takes. The lamp is the Atman, the awareness, the pure knowing presence that illuminates everything the pot contains. The pot has shapes, round or square, cracked or whole, painted or plain. The light inside does not take those shapes. The light is the same light regardless of the shape of the pot that contains it. And when the pots are broken, when the forms pass, as all forms pass, the light does not break with them. The light returns to the light. This is the Upanishadic understanding of what you are, not the pot, not the specific, impermanent, warm, endlessly interesting form that this particular life has taken. The light, the awareness, the knowing presence that has been illuminating this particular pot, and that is not ultimately different from the awareness that illuminates every other. The pot matters. The Upanishads are not dismissing the life of the particular person, the loves, the work, the history, the specific and unrepeatable journey of a consciousness through a body, through a world. They are saying that underneath the pot, behind the lamp, illuminating everything, there is something that does not change, that was there before the pot and will be there after, that is the same in you as it is in the person across from you and in the forest and the river and the sky. The Mahavakyas, the great sayings of the Upanishads, are 4 in number, each one a distillation of the central insight from a different angle. Prajnanam Brahman. Consciousness is Brahman. The aware intelligence that knows your experience is not a product of your brain. It is the ground of reality itself, appearing as knowing. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. The deepest I, the one behind the thoughts, behind the feelings, behind the story of the person, is not separate from the source of all things. Tat Tvam asi. That thou art. The formless ground of all existence, that is what you essentially are. Ayam Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman, not a distant, future, achievable state. This, the awareness present right now, reading these words, is already what the whole inquiry is pointing toward. 4 statements, different angles, same direction. The deepest self and the deepest reality are not two, and the life of ordinary consciousness, the life of the person who experiences themselves as bounded, separate, alone inside their particular pot, is not wrong exactly. It is incomplete, missing the ground on which it stands, unable to see the lamp for looking so intently at the shape of the pot. Now the bridge. Because the Upanishads were addressing people in a specific cultural and philosophical context, the Vedic tradition, the forest retreats, the tradition of direct meditative inquiry that produced the insight in the first place. Most of us are not living in forests. Most of us will not spend years in direct contemplative investigation of the nature of consciousness. Most of us are living the life of the pot, the specific, bounded, beautifully particular life of a person with a name and a history and the daily, completely ordinary experience of being a separate self, moving through a world of other separate selves. The Upanishads do not ask you to abandon this. Do not say the pot is an illusion to be transcended. Do not say the life of the particular person is unreal or unimportant or less valuable than the impersonal awareness it is said to rest on. They say, know what you are standing on. Know that the bounded self, real as it is not the whole of what you are. Know that the awareness through which you are experiencing this moment, this specific, ordinary, completely available awareness, is not produced by the history of the person who is having it, is older than the person, larger than the person. The same awareness that was here before you were born into it and will be here after this particular form has returned. You are the pot, and you are the light, both completely. Here is what the Upanishads ask of you practically today. First, ask the prior question. The Upanishadic inquiry begins with a question more fundamental than what should I do, or what do I want, or who am I in the sense of my history and character and preferences. The prior question is, who is asking, not the content of the answer, the awareness that is receiving the question, the presence that will read the answer once it arrives. What is that? Can you locate it? Can you find its edges, its beginning, its end?
Sit for 5 minutes today with this question. Not philosophically, not with the intention of arriving at a verbal answer, but as a direct investigation. Where is the awareness right now? What shape does it have? What color? What age? Can you find the one who is looking, or only the looking itself? The not finding is the finding. The awareness that cannot locate itself as an object is the Atman, present, always already here. Second, practice Tvam with one person. The radical ethical implication of the Upanishadic insight is this: if the deepest self in me and the deepest self in you are the same self, then the harm I do to you, I do to myself. The love I extend to you, I extend to the ground of my own being. Choose one person today, one specific, particular, complicated person, and hold the awareness, briefly and genuinely, that the awareness looking out through their eyes is the same awareness looking out through yours. Different pots, same light. Not as a performance, as an experiment. Notice what it does to the interaction, to the patience available, to the quality of attention you bring when you hold, even briefly, even imperfectly, that the person across from you is not ultimately other. Third, find the unchanging. The Upanishads make a distinction between what changes and what does not. The pot changes, the body ages, the mind evolves, the personality shifts, the circumstances transform. What does not change is the awareness that has been present through all the changes. Sit for a moment with your own history, the child you were at 8, the young adult at 22, the person at 40, the person right now. The body has changed completely. The mind has changed substantially. The memories, the understanding, the sense of what matters, all transformed. What has been the same? Not what has stayed consistent in personality or preference. What has been the unchanging witness, the awareness that was present at 8 and at 22 and at 40 and right now, that has watched everything change before itself changing. Find it, not intellectually, as a recognition. The awareness you are looking for is the awareness doing the looking. Fourth, read one Upanishad slowly. Not all of them. One, the Chandogya for Tat Twamasi. The Mandukya, which is the shortest, 12 verses, the most concentrated statement of the teaching available. The Kena, which asks the question from a different angle. By what does the mind think? By what does the eye see? What is the power behind the power? Read it slowly. In translation, there are several good ones. Read it the way the student sat near the teacher, close enough to receive what cannot be transmitted from a distance, with the specific quality of attention that is not processing information, but sitting with a question that is older than the tradition that is asking it. And let the question, what is the self, not be answered too quickly. Let it stay open. Let it do what it has been doing in the forests of India for 3,000 years, pointing the attention back toward itself, back toward the one who is asking, back toward what has always already been there. I want to close with one of the most famous exchanges in the entire Upanishadic literature, from the Kena Upanishad, one of the shorter texts, one of the most precise. A student asks the teacher, "What is Brahman? What is this ground of all things that the teaching is pointing toward? Can you describe it? Can you give me something to hold?" The teacher says, "It is not what the eye sees, but it is that by which the eye sees. It is not what the mind thinks, but it is that by which the mind thinks. It is not what speech expresses, but it is that by which speech is expressed." that by which the eye sees, that by which the mind thinks, that by which speech is expressed. Not an object, not a thing that can be known the way a tree or a city or a philosophy can be known from the outside as something the knowing is directed toward. The knowing itself, the awareness that underlies every act of knowing, that which is present in every experience without being any particular experience, that which is never not present, not in the deepest sleep, not in the most confused waking, not in the grief or the joy or the ordinary Tuesday morning, because it is not a state that comes and goes, but the ground in which all states arise and pass.
That by which you are reading this right now, that by which the question is being received, that by which anything is known at all. Tat Tvam Asi. That thou art. Here is the question the Upanishads leave us with today. Not from the forest, from here, from the ordinary awareness that is present right now, in this room, receiving these words. What is the awareness that is having your experience right now? Can you find its edges, its beginning, the place where it stops? And if you cannot, if the awareness that is looking cannot find itself as an object, what does that tell you about what you actually are? Leave that in the comments, because that answer, your Upanishadic answer, arrived at through the looking rather than the thinking, is not a small thing. It is the salt in the water, everywhere, invisible, present in every part. Tat Tvam Asi. That thou art. I'll see you in the next one.